Hello and welcome to MichelleMotivateMe.com. This podcast is entitled 7 Secrets to Improve Memorization. This is part of the Training and Coaching podcast series. I want to share my 7 secrets to improve memorization with you, but first, as always, I'm going to ask you to take out a pen and a piece of paper and write this down according to adult learning theory, even if you never look at this information again. The very fact that you've written it down will help you to retain this information. And this is about retaining and increasing your retention rates and improving memorization. So I do want you to write this down. Okay, what I'd like you to do is on your piece of paper, go ahead and draw out a triangle or a pyramid. Now make it like an isosceles triangle, which if I'm remembering correctly from class, it's equal on all sides. So a nice even triangle. At the very, very tip of it, I want you to imagine that those are the retention rates that are the least effective. And then the fat part of the triangle, the one on the bottom, is the techniques, the tool that we're going to be using that will help retain information the most. Now, what I'd like to do is throw out some ideas to you, and I would like you to fill in your triangle. If you divide it into 7 different areas, you want to put the technique that you think will help to retain information the most at the bottom and the least effective technique at the top. Okay, I'm going to just throw out some techniques to you, and you write them wherever you think they fit in that triangle. Okay, number 1, what about lecture? We know that in schools they have lecture halls. So where does that fit in? Number 2, demonstration. If you look on any infomercial, you will see that they are always demoing the product and showing us how to use it. Number 3, practice by doing. We've all heard that old adage, practice makes perfect. Number 4, what about teaching others? How does that help you to retain the information? Where does that fit? Number 5, reading. Number 6, audio visual. And finally, number 7, discussion. Does it help the students at all to discuss the information? Now, we may be very surprised by the answers, and I will give you those answers in a few moments. In traditional training, whether that be in classroom training or on-the-job training when you're working one-on-one, or you may be working in groups when you're working on-the-job training, there are some things that we are so used to, and lecture is definitely one of them. And as I mentioned earlier, we have lecture halls in many of our famous colleges and universities. Okay, so now let me give you the answers. The least effective, the one that should have been on the top of your triangle in that very, very small tip there, is lecture. Surprise, surprise. You only retain, the experts tell us that we only retain 5% of the information that we receive when we've been lectured to. Next is reading, 10%. Audio visual, 20%. Demonstration, 30%. Discussion, 50%. Practice by doing, 75%. And teaching others, this is the winner, 90%. We retain 90% of the information that we need to hold on to when we have an obligation to teach others or when we actually do teach others. All right, so let's look at this a little bit. What should we do with this information? Number 1, I think the first thing that we need to think about is reducing lecture. Number 2, maybe it would be a good idea to ask your students, or if you're a manager and supervisor and you're going to be doing some on-the-job training the next day, to hand out a piece of paper with some information on it and ask the trainee or the student or the participant, whatever you want to call him or her, to read that information prior to coming to work, prior to coming to class. Number 3, a good idea is to limit audio-visual. PowerPoint is an excellent tool. Videos are great for teaching, but it shouldn't be the entire presentation. You need to incorporate some of these other techniques that we've been talking about. Number 4, use demonstration, definitely, to add variety, especially in a safety class. Can't you see that? Having a fire extinguisher, passing it around the room, letting everybody feel the weight of it or try it out. Number 5, discussion. You want to ask questions. Find out who the experts are in the class and ask them to give you some information. It makes it more interesting for the other participants to hear somebody else talk as well. Maybe you could do an icebreaker and have them interview each other prior to doing an exercise, and then have them share what they've learned from their other students about the training material. Okay, number 6 is practice by doing. This takes a little bit of preparation because you're going to have some materials there for them to be able to practice. And then number 7, have them teach others. And I'm going to give you a little bit more detail in your action plan on how to do that. So, without any further ado, let's get into the action plan. As I give you in most of these podcasts, I want you to be able to do something with this information. So in this one specifically, I'm going to give you an action plan. So the 3 most effective ways to retain the information in your sessions. Number 1 that I want to talk about is discussion. I think that you will retain a lot more information. Your students, participants, employees will retain a lot more information if you discuss things with them. Decide before you do the training what you're going to discuss, how you're going to discuss it, and then what do you want as an outcome of this discussion. You also want to talk about potential problems, talk about goals, expectations, and remember, you're not lecturing, you are discussing. Number 2, practice by doing. You want to think about how you're going to let this person practice, if it's a one-on-one session or if it's in a classroom setting, how you can let them all practice. Maybe role play. If it's not something physical, and you are going to have to ask them to remember some information, especially with soft skills, you may use role play. Or can they physically do the tasks in the training environment? Can you set up a model or a simulator? You want to think about all those things. And then number 3 is teach others. Now, this is my great plan on having you be able to work with other people in the classroom environment, or if it's a group of people in the job site, you could have them number off, meaning you have them go around the room and say 1 or 2. And as each individual either says 1 or 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 around the room, you decide that all the number 1s, you line them up in an actual line and you have them be the instructors. Then the number 2s are the students. So you may ask them to teach something for maybe a minute or 2 minutes. And then you have them switch. So now everyone in your classroom has played the part of the instructor, and you've utilized the most important technique in retaining retention, increasing your retention rates, improving memorization, which is teaching others 90%. Congratulations. You've done a fantastic job if you are going to teach this information to someone else. You've learned the concept that I was trying to communicate. Okay, as always, I'm very excited to hear your success stories, so send me an email at michelle@michellemotivateme.com and think about some of the other podcasts that we have. And as you're retaining this information, utilize some of the tools that we've discussed here.